You're very welcome back to the 12 Rants of Christmas. I'm Jer Leggett, and today I want to discuss New Year's resolutions, aka to the quote Fleetwood Mac, tell me lies, sweet little lies. Anyone who watched last year's 12 Rants of Christmas might remember that I'm actually not the biggest fan of New Year's Eve. In fact, back in the day when I was in my 20s and I used to feel pressured to do something for New Year's, it actually drive me a bit loopy. And here's a clip for anyone who doesn't know what I'm talking about.
So now I'm in Marbella and we're all just sitting around a wonky table in the middle of a field outside a hotel in the freezing fucking cold, which I was sure it would at least be warm if I went away for holidays, but no, doing shots of I don't know what. And this is a well-established friend group of Sven, so they're all doing like inside jokes and piss poor broken English because, well, they're Sven's friends, so they're Swedish obviously, but they're trying to include me too, so they're being a little bit friendly, but their attempt of trying to include me involves telling stories and making jokes that I wasn't there for to begin with because I don't know these people. We go out that night and we end up in some random shitty Swedish-based nightclub with Avicii and Bass Hunter on repeat. Then at midnight, we're all like 10, 9, 8. And the same thing happens as every year at the end of the countdown. What are we counting down for? We know what's coming. Nothing. It's just time to buy a new calendar and everyone is, for some reason, delighted with that. Why? Why are we celebrating this? All that's going to happen for the next few weeks of our lives is we're all going to write down the wrong year whenever we need to write down the year and look like idiots. This is not fun. And now I'm lost. And I've lost Sven. I don't actually know the way back to our Marbella hotel as well because its name is in Swedish, so I can't even spell it on Google Maps. So instead, I wander around aimlessly on my own, copying and pasting the same generic Happy New Year's message into WhatsApp group chats, pretending that this night is amazing. Everyone in the club has someone to shift apparently at midnight but me, and they all then turn and laugh at me cruelly, again in broken English because, again, remember, all Swedish being like, ha ha, ugly little liars, guys, not enough of a man to kiss any of these beautiful Swedish kvinna. Kvinna is Swedish for women, obviously. So I go outside for a smoke and it's a nice night, so I decide, let's just go for a walk. So I walk and I walk and walk until I end up at the airport, and the rest of my stuff is in the hotel I can't find, so I just decide, you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna write it off and use my remaining Christmas card money on an early flight home. Upon touching back down in Dublin with one tear hanging from my cheek for hours, my phone springs back into life and there's a voice note on it from Gary saying that this is the best New Year's ever, man. I can't believe you couldn't make it. But you know what, Gary? I could have made it. I could have made it. 2 days beforehand, I was yours. And now I'm entering this New Year's not even knowing who I am or who my friends are anymore. And look, obviously none of that happened, and it's just stuff my socially anxious mind imagined while I was waiting for Gary to text back. But this is how crazy the mindset of needing to make plans for these stupid days make me feel.
Yeah, it was rough times back then. It might surprise you then to hear that I'm actually a big proponent of New Year's resolutions. No, not just picking something random and saying, I'm gonna be a triathlete, when you haven't even walked to the shops in about 15 years, just because you felt you had to say something when everyone went around the Christmas table and it was your turn to speak. But if it's something meaningful that you've been working towards, or if you're stuck in a bit of a rut and need a change in your life, New Year's can be a great excuse to just take a beat and reset, to put your life a bit more on a trajectory in line with what you want it to be. Because let's stick with the triathlete bit for no other reason than that's the example I thought of. If that is something you've always dreamed of, but you're kind of stuck in the everyday grind of going to work, collecting the kids from school, making the dinner, watching an episode or two or whatever shite is in your Netflix queue while downing half a bottle of wine. We say half a bottle, but we all know, really, you get through a full bottle, don't you, Brenda? You do, don't you? Come on, you can talk to us. Then, if that's your life, when the fuck do you have time to think about all the triathlete training? All of a sudden, you become a slave in your own routine without even realizing it. Often money, kids, and the expectations of others necessitates a routine, and that's fair enough, but also, it's your fucking life. You only get one go at it for all we know, and the next thing you know, you could be blowing out the candles for your 30th, your 40th, your 50th birthday, and the life you lived just felt like it kind of happened rather than being a grand design of what you'd planned or representative of who you are as a person. Instead, what you do day to day might look more like a collage of what you need to do to pay the heating bills at Christmas, what your kids or pets need to survive and thrive, and what everyone else expects of you because that makes their lives easier. For many, they can get so caught in this web that the idea of asking themselves, well, what do you want your life to be, seems like such a ridiculous luxury that it's laughable, or they don't even know the questions to ask themselves to even think about that. And look, I'm not here to suggest anything wild like just leave your family and job, YOLO. I just want to talk about my own experience this year where I kind of slipped into that mold without even realizing it. And how all of that ended up with me bringing back a part of myself that I thought I'd laid to rest when I resurrected Low Blows Events and Media Company. And how I realized that sometimes if you're looking for ideas or inspiration to move forward, the best thing you can do is look backwards. I'd started Low Blows kind of by accident in 2012 after looking around for bars in Dublin to watch The Rock's comeback match for WrestleMania 28, finding none and realizing that my weird background in pro wrestling, DJing, running events, and social media marketing meant I might be the only person around who has actually had all the weird skills required to be able to run a night like that the right way. We sold out Captain America's Grafton Street for a night that was just supposed to be a one-off. It was literally me just making plans for the world instead of anything else. But the feedback was so positive that it quickly became clear that I had struck on something that a lot of people wanted. And for the next decade of my life, I had other plans. I was emigrating to America, but then I ended up spending a decade of my life growing a little community, and it just so happened that my unique skill set gave them what they wanted. We started a podcast network on Spotify, we started a video on demand network for local wrestling, we even had a band that played wrestling theme songs at one point. For much of this, I was working in a bit of a shitty security job that paid the bills, but also gave me the freedom to do whatever I needed to run Low Blows. But as it became clear that while a lot of people enjoyed what we did, but it wasn't scalable enough to ever do as a full-time job, yet the daily workload of trying to do that became almost crushing, I decided that a real job was needed. For a couple of years, I did manage to juggle both hand in hand, and we somehow managed to be one of the few event companies that went into COVID and came out the other side because we pivoted to kind of virtual nights and events early on. But it was actually as we came out of COVID and restrictions eased up towards the end of 2021 that I had to think to myself, do I actually want to throw myself back into that grind all over again? My passion for wrestling, and I think a lot of people felt the same, between WWE becoming fairly depressing during the Thunderdome era, speaking out, which for anyone who doesn't know was WWE's form, or wrestling's form of Me Too, exposing many of the performers that I'd liked were actually super creeps. It waned quite a lot. And on the flip side, the day job was actually going really well too, and I wanted to put more energy into that. Life at that stage was pulling me in a certain direction, and I wasn't going to fight it, so I made the tough call to cease all operations with Low Blows. I knew at the time it was the right move. I'd done all I needed to do. We'd sparked copycats even in other countries. There's a British equivalent of us out there who like even do have a prediction league and stuff like that. And I'm like, lads, just change the words, like call it a pick'em or something like. But like there's copycats all around, and that's actually not something that I have a problem with. It's something that I think is really cool. But we were still recognized by a distance as the original and best at what we do. It's like I always say, it's the one thing that I can do that I can say I'm actually the best in the world at doing it. And I was going out on my own terms where we easily could have brought the parties back and a lot of people wanted it back and it would have been a big hit again. But it was a proper kind of completed it, mate moment. And truth be told, I wanted to see what someone else would do with the concept. And I wanted to support anyone who would do it well as well. I wanted to just be a punter and go tonight and have someone look after my pay-per-view instead. In my day job, I continued to grow and learn. I started Page 180, which was an idea that I'd had for a while, but because I was working so hard on Low Blows, I could never really get time to get it off the ground. And I kept that as a way to kind of have as a hobby and keep podcasting, which I really enjoyed. Life was good, and that was what I wanted at the time. But as time went on, a few things just naturally started to weirdly align. In work, I started to learn about the psychology behind customer experience, which reminded me so much of what I'd done with Low Blows without ever really meaning to make the nights and the entire experience with us, from going to the nights or listening to the podcast or interacting with us on social media, the even simple stuff like buying tickets, stand out from the crowd. And I started to see things that I also could have done but didn't do to have made it better now that I understood all of this. So I was like, oh, I wish I got a chance to kind of do that and see how that worked. My passion for wrestling never fully died either. I kept watching and kept enjoying it. It just more dulled for a while than anything else. But then as the world reopened again, Vince McMahon left WWE and the likes of AEW came over to Wembley, it began to come back in a big, big way. And most importantly towards this, nobody really stepped up in my absence to take over running parties for wrestling fans. A couple of venues and people tried over the years and I supported them and went along, all the while kind of deflecting their emails, asking me for help, or just outright saying, you can just run this for us, like you can just go. And I was like, no, I've told you I quit. But it wasn't the same. And it never caught on with anyone but us. You can put on wrestling in a bar and people can go to watch it with their mates. That's easy. Like, you just have to put it on the telly. But that's not why people came to a Low Blows night. And everyone who comes to our nights knows that. You come because of the random moments that we, and I mean we, not just as in Low Blows, but Low Blows and the people there, made before the wrestling even started. Like, one time we wrote an entire wrestling themed mass and everyone who was there played along with it as the venue staff looked on completely freaked out as to what was happening exactly, or the things that didn't go to plan but actually made the story funnier. Like, one time we were watching the pre-show of a pay-per-view and the feed just cut out of nowhere, so we pivoted and we tried to find a stream online. But you know, these streaming sites, there's a lot of porn on that. And we started to get pop-ups on the big screen in a pub of like, girls want to talk to you in your area, and everyone's like, yeah. It was brilliant. And that's like what it was. It was about the atmosphere that we set that kind of conditioned you then, that when we kind of finished up what we did and the venue took over and started screening the pay-per-view, you were conditioned, you were chilled out, and you'd had a laugh, so that it just became like a live event. It just became like you were there. Or even better, sometimes we get people up on stage to have the crack, and then everyone would have kind of shared memories and stories to chat about. I started to miss all of this, and then I started having mates over in my house, like last year at the Royal Rumble, to watch big wrestling shows. And there I'd kind of tell them to come over early and we'd play games beforehand while we had drinks. And it was like, this is very similar to what you used to do, Jer. Come on. At the start of the year, I was going out with someone and I was telling her about this mad little world that I used to run. She'd asked me more, so I started digging up old videos. And when I was doing that and digging them up, they just led me down rabbit holes where for hours at a time, I'd remember entire weeks and months of my life that I'd just totally forgotten about because so much happened in those days. In looking at old videos and clips of old parties and podcasts, I'd see a version of myself, though, that I'd kind of put to bed in recent years. That version was really fun, really ambitious. He was great crack. He didn't ever stop chasing his dreams, and he didn't give a shit if people shit talked if what he was doing made sense to him and the people who got it. I still loved and still do love my day job. I work in the same place and I plan to continue to do so. But there's a couple of things that happened there that kind of told me all that, like, the previous plan that I'd had that I gave up low blows for wasn't going 100% to plan, and I shouldn't just wait around for the stars to align for that plan to fall into place, because I didn't control all of the elements in them, especially if I had all of these ideas and plans that could be used like in other areas. When you're creative and you do this stuff, people who don't get it, particularly people who don't support you and like don't aren't there to see the vision play out, they don't really understand what that's like. And because your brain works differently to them, it makes some people kind of insecure, and they try cast aspersions or judgments on you. So they think stuff like, well, they're only doing that for money or attention. But it's not actually like that at all. If that kind of stuff comes along as like kind of a benefit to it, then amazing, that's great. But this feeling is genuinely like you've got an itch that you're just not able to scratch or do anything about, and it's just driving you insane because you have an idea and you want to do it. Like a chef, you've got a recipe in your head that you want other people to try, and whatever way your brain works, you only get happiness from trying making the recipe and then feeding others and watching them enjoy it. That's the way your brain works when you do what I do. These feelings were just reigniting in me, and they were pointing my life in a particular direction again. But also, I think it's important to note, because while I am saying sometimes it's good to look back to find a way forward, it's not always the best thing. And I think the dividing line that you have to draw for yourself is, am I being nostalgic, or do I see a new future? Do I see new opportunities? Do I see new things that I want to do? Is there something that I can look forward to rather than just trying to go backwards to the things that worked beforehand? Because you can experience many of the same feelings that I did going through old videos and telling old stories and learning about different things. When you look at pictures and videos of, say, you with an ex or whatever, you see this old version of yourself at a happier time and you feel nostalgic, and you can forget all of the many valid reasons that it ended, because those feelings are really powerful, and you can just assume that you can just rewind to that point and that'll be the solution to the feeling the part of you is missing. I was very conscious of this fact. I didn't want to just, like, I've been that guy who dipped my toe back in with exes before, then realizing within hours or days of actually being in their presence why it ended to begin with. And I didn't want to go through the long and arduous process of bringing back low blows only to realize within a couple of weeks why I stopped it to begin with. I needed a vision to be able to see in my head, to know what success looked like so I could gauge if it was working, to know what I wanted to get out of it beyond just feeling good. And there was one last litmus test that I wanted to pass that would tell me if this was the right thing to do and if the vision that I had was actually going to pan out and was realistic. Because there was one ex who I wanted to get back with if I was going to do this and do it the right way. And that ex was the woolshed. Low blows are probably our happiest times in the woolshed, and our time running nights there between 2013 and 2017. And I think our audience did as well. And that's certainly kind of the feedback that I get from talking to people at parties. We were still on great terms. Like, I'd live not too far from it, so I'd still regularly go down there to watch sports. And the Super Bowl in Woolshed is like an annual part of my calendar that I just block off every year. So I kind of said, right, I've got a vision, I've got an idea. If they're up for it, so am I. If they're not, that's like telling me this isn't panning out and it's just a pie in the sky idea. Fortunately, they were. So that meant that this is what I knew the people who had come to our nights previously wanted, and it was exactly what that picture of success I had in my head looked like. With that, everything else just started to click back into place in the way that happens when you know you've made a right decision. I began to see what the trailer that we'd come back and relaunch with by surprise would look like. Some fun ways we could kind of tap into our old regulars' nostalgia, or show people who were too young what Low Blows was about and why it was a good idea and what the big deal was, and how we could make the parties look and feel both nostalgic for older people but also fresh, like they weren't just a relic from the past. You know, like when you go to a nightclub when you're like in your 30s and all of a sudden you're like, the music's very loud, why did I enjoy it? I didn't want it to feel that way either. Like, oh no, this was a thing I did 10 years ago, but it really doesn't work now. I wanted to give it some kind of fresh feeling. Saturday, 6th of April. Low Blows return to the Woolshed, and with the original cast too of myself, Jerry O'Brien, and Jimmy Doyle. And it was fucking great. Not only did we bring back so many of the OGs who had gone to the nights over a decade ago, but a host of younger people who were too young to go to the nights back then, but had heard the good word and wanted to be a part of it. They came along too. In fact, there was probably more newer people than there was people that I recognized there. 8 months on, and we are now back. We're getting ready for probably our biggest night since the comeback, for the Royal Rumble party on Saturday the 1st of February. Little plug, tickets are on sale by eventbrite.ie, by the way. Tables are getting close to selling out, by the way, so get on there ASAP. But I'm not here to plug a future party. The point I'm here to make is I had successfully looked back to figure out what I was missing to allow me to move forward, but I'd done so again, not just because I wanted to rewind my life, but because I could see a future and a way forward and not just nostalgia. Whatever your New Year's resolutions, and whether I hate this stupid day or not, I hope you guys have a really happy new year, and thank you for listening. And that's been the 12 Rants of Christmas for today. I'm Jared Leggett, and I'll be back tomorrow to take a little break away from the 12 Rants. We're going to continue with the Low Blows wrestling chat, as I'm going to present a Low Blow short looking at, with Wrestle Kingdom 19 coming up this Saturday, why New Japan should break up with AEW. I'll chat to you then, guys.